In a silent hallway of a billion-dollar company, a tiny 5-year-old girl sat trying to be invisible. But what she saw would expose a crime worth $9 billion, shake the lives of thousands, and change a cold-hearted billionaire forever. With trembling lips, she whispered just 5 words to the most powerful man in the building. I saw them switch the folder. That moment didn't just save a company, it saved a broken man's soul. Stay with this story, because the smallest voice in the room is about to become the loudest. Emma had learned how to disappear in a building that touched the sky, filled with polished floors and people who never looked down. She had mastered the art of being unseen. While her mother scrubbed bathrooms and emptied trash bins, Emma sat quietly in a corner outside a massive glass conference room, hugging her old backpack to her chest. She was just a housekeeper's daughter, invisible, forgotten. Around her, powerful footsteps echoed, expensive shoes clicking like impatient clocks. Men and women rushed by, speaking in words she didn't understand. Mergers, contracts, shares. No one ever asked her name. No one even noticed she was there. Until fate placed her in the exact seat where truth was about to surface. Two men in dark suits stepped into the hallway. Their voices were tense, low, rushed. "Is this the right folder?" One of them whispered. "Yes." "Red stripe. This is the one the boss already signed." Emma's eyes lifted to the thin red-striped folder in his hands. Then, in a quick, nervous motion, the second man pulled out another set of papers and slid them inside, switching them with the originals. Her small hands tightened around her backpack. Something wasn't right. Her heart began to race, not because she understood contracts or signatures, but because she recognized fear, guilt, lies, and suddenly, her mother's voice echoed inside her mind, soft but unbreakable. "Always tell the truth, even when your voice is shaking." The men turned and walked away, leaving behind silence, and a child no one thought was important enough to notice. But Emma had seen everything, and though she was small, scared, and shaking, she knew one thing for sure. What they had done was wrong, and someone had to tell the man whose name hung on every wall of the building, the billionaire himself. The elevator doors slid open with a soft metallic sigh. Silence fell across the entire hallway. People didn't even realize they were holding their breath. Yet somehow, they all were. William Richardson stepped out, owner of the company that a billionaire, that a name printed in gold on glass doors and etched into the skyline. He was tall, sharp, and perfectly composed, his tailored suit as flawless as his reputation. His expression was calm but cold, the kind that made grown men straighten their backs and swallow their words. Wherever he walked, the air changed, that he didn't need to announce his presence. Power had its own language. Executives waiting near the conference room immediately froze, nervous smiles stretching across their faces. "Good morning, Mr. Richardson," one said carefully. William gave a slight nod, his gaze distant. His mind was already deep in numbers, expansions, and boardroom battles. Today was critical. A contract was being finalized, one that could determine the future of the entire company. He began walking down the hall toward the boardroom. And that's when he saw her, that a little girl, sitting on the floor near the glass wall. She didn't belong here. No bike, no tablet, no Chris blazer. Just an old backpack, worn shoes, and wide, frightened eyes looking up at a world far bigger than her. For a moment, he nearly kept walking, that he shouldn't be stopping. He didn't have time. People like her were not supposed to intersect with people like him. But there was something in her eyes. They weren't curious. They weren't asking for attention. They were carrying a secret too heavy for a child to hold. William hesitated. The entire hallway watched in disbelief as the most powerful man in the building actually slowed, then stopped. He turned to her. "Where is your mother?" he asked, his voice deep, calm, yet slightly softened in a way his employees had never heard before. Emma's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hands trembled in her lap. She looked down at the floor, then back up at him. Thought he noticed it then. The fear, the conflict, the courage growing inside her chest, fighting with every instinct to stay quiet. "It's all right," he said gently. "You're not in trouble." Emma swallowed hard. She leaned forward just slightly, her voice barely more than a breath, but in that breath history shifted. I saw them switch the folder, she whispered. William froze. Every muscle in his body tightened. Switch the folder? He repeated, slowly, carefully. Who did? They were in suits, she said, her words shaking but steady in meaning. The one with the red stripe on it. They said you wouldn't notice. The world around them faded away. Executives. Assistants. Phones ringing. Footsteps echoing. None of it mattered. All that remained was a child's whisper and the crashing realization flooding into William's mind. The contract. The final version. The signatures. The years of work. The billions at stake. Red-striped folder. He had seen that folder 100 times. He had trusted that folder with the future of his empire. And now this invisible child was telling him that the people he trusted most had betrayed him. That a long, dangerous silence filled the air. Where are they now? He asked, his voice low, no longer gentle, now edged with something dark and deadly calm. Emma pointed down the hallway. William straightened. His kind expression vanished. In its place stood the cold, calculating titan that built an empire from nothing to everyone watching. Something terrifyingly important had just happened. John, he said quietly to his head of security, who rushed to his side. No one leaves this floor. I want the red-striped folder in my hand in the next 30 seconds. And I want every person who touched it standing in front of me. Yes, sir. The hallway erupted in controlled chaos. Doors shut. Guards moved. Panicked faces grew pale. But William remained still. And for the first time in many years, he looked down at a child not as a distraction, but as a savior. He crouched slightly in front of Emma, lowering himself to her level. You just saved this company, he said quietly. Do you know that? Emma shook her head lightly. I remembered what my mom said. What did she say? He asked, to always tell the truth. His jaw tightened. A billion-dollar empire had nearly collapsed under lies and was saved by one small, trembling, honest voice. In that moment, William didn't see a housekeeper's daughter. He saw courage. Integrity, that a strength this building had never held before. Security returned, holding the folder. William opened it. His eyes scanned the altered pages. The evidence was undeniable. Someone had attempted to destroy him from inside his own walls. Slowly, he closed the folder. Then he looked back at Emma. What is your name, brave girl? Emma, she whispered. Well, Emma, he said, standing tall again, today the most important person in this building is you. And somewhere down the hall, two men felt their world about to end. The security room was never meant for moments like this. The IT was quiet, dimly lit, filled with the soft hum of machines and the faint blinking of screens that watched every corner of the building. It was a place of routine, not revelation. But tonight it felt like a courtroom before a verdict. William Richardson stood in front of the largest monitor, his hands folded behind his back, his jaw clenched so tightly that a small muscle pulsed in his temple. Around him, his head of security, legal advisor, and 3 members of the board watched in tense silence on the screen. The hallway footage played back in haunting clarity. 2 men. Dark suits, nervous eyes, the red-striped folder. William watched as one of the men checked his surroundings, then quickly swapped the papers. A clean exchange. A perfect crime. Except it hadn't been perfect that a small figure could be seen in the corner of the video. A nearly invisible child, still as a statue. Watching, remembering, telling the truth. Zoom in on the girl, Williams said quietly. The image expanded that Emma's wide eyes filled the screen. He felt something twist in his chest. All these years he had walked these halls, thinking he knew every weakness, every risk, every threat. He had built layers of protection thick enough to stop the world's most dangerous enemies. And yet, the real danger had been right beside him all along, dressed in fine suits and false loyalty. Run the audio from the corridor, he ordered, static, then muffled voices broke through the speakers. This is the one the boss already signed. He won't notice. He trusts us. A bitter, humorless exhale escaped William's lips that he trusts us. That was nearly a $9 billion lie. Match them to employee records, he said. Seconds later, profiles flashed on another screen. Victor Hale, Senior Finance Director Marcus Lyle. Legal executive consultant trusted. Respected. Powerful. Traitors. Call the police, Williams said, his voice low and razor-sharp. And freeze every account connected to these men. Personal, corporate, offshore. I want them with nowhere to run. His security chief nodded and picked up the phone. Minutes later, heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor outside the security room. Through the glass wall, they watched as armed officers escorted Victor and Marcus back into the building. Hands cuffed, faces drained of all color. Employees peeked from offices. Hands flew to mouths. Whispers rippled through the halls like an electric current. What happened? Those are executives? Oh my God! Victor's eyes locked onto William through the glass. Panic. Anger. Betrayal. You have no proof, he shouted, his voice cracking. This is madness. William didn't move. He didn't even blink. Actually, he said calmly, not raising his voice at all, I have more proof than you ever thought possible. His gaze shifted past the police, past the glass, past the chaos to the corner of the hallway, where Emma stood holding her backpack, her mother beside her, her small hands tightly gripping the fabric of her mother's worn uniform. She looked scared but proud, and her mother looked like she wasn't sure whether to run or kneel or cry. The police dragged the men away. Their shouting disappeared down the elevator shaft, replaced by an eerie silence that spread through the building, that a silence filled with understanding that a catastrophe had been stopped. William turned to his team, his words heavy with truth. If that folder had reached the boardroom, he said quietly, this company would have lost $9 billion before the sun set. They all stared at him, shocked. Our stock would have collapsed. Lawsuits would have poured in. We would have closed entire departments. Whole divisions, he paused. More than 3,000 employees would have been laid off within a month. 3,000 lives, 3,000 families, 3,000 children, just like Emma, saved by a whisper. The weight of that reality fell hard on his shoulders. For the first time in years, he felt something real, not control, not strategy, not dominance, just raw, undeniable humanity, gratitude, shame, hope. William stepped out into the hallway. The employees had gathered in cautious clusters now, watching him with unsure eyes. They expected fury. They expected instructions. They expected the iron-fisted billionaire who ruled with numbers and consequences. Instead, they saw him walk toward a little girl. He knelt in front of Emma again. Her mother gasped softly. I'm so sorry, sir. I never should have let her be out here. Please don't apologize, William said gently. Holding up a hand, he took out his handkerchief and carefully wiped a small smudge of dirt from Emma's cheek. A simple, paternal gesture that stunned everyone who saw it. You didn't just tell the truth today, he said to her. You protected this entire building. Every person in it. Every family it supports. Emma blinked. I just didn't want you to be tricked. He smiled. A real one. A rare one. Very few adults care enough to do what you did, he replied. And even fewer have your courage. He looked up at her mother then. Your daughter is a hero, he said, and she learned honesty from you. Tears filled the woman's eyes. I just cleaned floors, sir. William slowly rose to his feet. No, he said. You raised someone who saved an empire. The hallway was completely silent now. Every executive, every assistant, every intern, every guard, they all watched the billionaire not as a king, but as a man humbled. William turned to the crowd. Today was not about money, he said loudly enough for all to hear. It was about character. And the most important person in this building doesn't wear a suit. His eyes returned to Emma. The building erupted into applause, soft at first, then louder, then overwhelming. Clapping hands, tears, hands over hearts. And in the middle of it all stood a little girl who had once believed she was invisible. But now, the entire world was finally seeing her. For the first time in a very long time, William Richardson did not leave the building in his private car that evening. The driver waited outside. The engine stayed running. But William stood still near the lobby windows, staring out at the fading sky, watching the city he had helped shape with money, steel, and ruthless ambition. For years, this building had been just another asset in an empire. Cold glass, cold marble, cold decisions. IT had never been a home for anyone. until a frightened little girl changed everything. He slowly turned his gaze back inside. Employees were moving carefully now, quietly, as if the entire atmosphere of the building had shifted on unseen. Gears. They looked at him differently, not with fear, but with curiosity, hope, even gratitude, that he realized something that struck deeper than any betrayal ever could. He had known every chart, every profit margin, every risk percentage by heart, but he had never known his people. That he never knew the night guards who missed their children's bedtimes, the assistants who skipped lunch to make deadlines, the janitors who worked in silence so the company could shine, the mother who brought her child to work because there was no one else to care for her. And yet, that invisible child had just saved 3,000 families from destruction. His chest tightened. What kind of leader sees billions, but not the people who make them possible? William left his car waiting and began to walk through his building. Truly walk through it. For the first time, he stepped into the employee break room. That he saw chipped mugs, cheap vending machines, worn chairs, flickering lights. How many exhausted souls had sat in here, thinking they didn't matter. He stepped into the maintenance hallway. The paint was peeling. The air was warmer, heavier, a place meant to be unseen. Unnoticed, he walked into the cleaning storage where Emma's mother now stood, nervously holding a mop as if it were a shield. "Sir," she whispered, unsure whether to bow, cry, or disappear. "What is your name?" he asked. "Anna," she replied softly. "Anna," he repeated. "How long have you worked here?" She lowered her eyes. 8 years, sir. 8 years, 8 years walking past this woman without knowing her name. "Why didn't you ever ask for better hours? Better pay?" he asked. She gave a sad, gentle smile. "People like me don't ask, sir. We're just grateful to be allowed inside." Her words pierced deeper than any knife. "No, Anna," he said quietly. "People like you're the only reason this place works at all." He walked out without another word, leaving her stunned in silence. An hour later, he was in the boardroom. Executives sat in their seats, nervous and confused. They expected more investigations, more accusations, maybe even firings. What they didn't expect was transformation. William stood at the head of the table, hands resting firmly on the polished wood. "I spent my whole life building an empire," he began. "And today I realized I built it blind." They shifted in their chairs. A little girl helped me see. Silence. Starting now, things change. He slid a folder across the table. A new one. No red stripe. No secrets. Just truth. From today onward, every employee receives a salary increase. No exceptions. The people who clean the floors, guard the doors, serve the coffee, are just as valuable as the ones who wear the suits. Murmurs filled the room. "We will add health care, paid parental leave, emergency family support, and real protection for every worker in this company. Anyone who disrespects them is gone." A pause. "I built this company on numbers," he said. "From now on, we run it on respect." The room went completely silent, and then slow nods began to appear. Eyes softened. For the first time in years, the board wasn't just looking at a billionaire. They were looking at a man becoming human again. But his greatest change was yet to come. That afternoon, William asked for Emma to be brought to his office. She entered hesitantly, holding her mother's hand. The massive office, once a terrifying place, now felt oddly warm, bathed in golden light. That on his desk sat a small velvet box. He knelt down in front of her. "Emma, do you know what stars are?" he asked gently. She nodded, her eyes wide. "They guide people in the dark." A faint smile touched his lips as he opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, a tiny star hanging from its chain. "You were a star in a dark hallway," he said. "This is to remind you that your voice matters. Always." Carefully, he placed it around her neck. Tears silently ran down Anna's cheeks. "You also," he continued, looking at Emma now with deep sincerity, "have earned something else." He placed another folder on the desk. "A good one. A true one. A full scholarship. Any school. Any university. Any dream you choose, Emma. This company will make it possible." Her mouth fell open. "But I'm just the cleaning lady's daughter," she whispered. William shook his head. "No," he corrected softly. "You are the girl who saved 3,000 lives with the truth." Emma looked up at her mother. Anna dropped to her knees in gratitude, hands shaking. Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I will work until my very last breath to repay you. William gently helped her up. You already have, he said. You raised a child who reminded me what being rich really means. News of the changes spread through the building like warm sunlight through winter. Laughter returned to the halls. People began to greet one another by name, not by rank. Break rooms were renovated, painted, filled with real food, soft chairs, music. Walls that once echoed with silence now hummed with life. And every single time William passed a worker, he looked them in the eyes, he saw them. All of them died on the top floor. In his once lonely office, he stood at the window once again, but the city no longer looked like territory to conquer. IT looked like people to protect, and standing beside him was a little girl with a star around her neck. You changed this place, he told her. Emma shook her head and smiled. No, sir. You did. I just helped you see. And for the first time in many, many years, William Richardson believed in something greater than success, that he believed in people. 6 months later, the building no longer felt like a business. IT felt like a family. Where there had once been quiet corridors and bowed heads, there was now laughter echoing through the halls. Where there had once been fear and exhaustion, there was energy, music, and life. Employees greeted one another by name. Children knew their parents' co-workers. Walls that had once absorbed stress now reflected light that on a warm, bright Saturday morning, the entire company gathered in a massive city park just outside the skyline William Richardson had helped create. Banners wave in the air. A day for our people, family first, thank you. Emma, food trucks lined the edges of the park. Music played from speakers placed between oak trees. Faces that once looked drained and distant now glowed with smiles and relief. Families sat together on picnic blankets, people who, months earlier, nearly lost everything without even knowing it. Children ran barefoot through the grass. Parents laughed without looking at their phones. The air buzzed with joy. IT looked like a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle. That IT was the result of one tiny act of courage, spoken in a whisper. Near the center of it all stood Emma. She was wearing a simple white dress, and around her neck shimmered the small silver star. Sunlight caught it as she turned, making it sparkle like a real piece of sky had fallen just for her. She laughed freely now. The same girl who had once sat silent in the corner of a cold hallway, trying not to take up too much space, was now running through open fields, her laughter rising above the crowd. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was light. William stood nearby, watching her, his hands in his pockets, a soft smile resting on his face. He had traded power for presence, control for compassion, fear for gratitude. Anna walked up beside him, holding 2 cups of lemonade. She has real friends now, she said quietly, watching her daughter play. She always deserved them. William replied, but a stage was set near the middle of the park. Not for press, not for investors, not for headlines, for the people. William was handed a microphone, but for once he didn't feel like a king addressing his kingdom. He felt like a man thanking his family. 6 months ago, he began, his voice warm. I believe this company was built by money, contracts, and decisions made in rooms like boardrooms. He paused, smiling as applause rippled. I was wrong. This company is built by hands, by hearts, by mothers, by fathers, by children, by courage. His gaze found Emma in the crowd. A little girl, a housekeeper's daughter, saved this entire company because she refused to stay silent in the face of wrong. Everyone turned to look at her. Emma froze for a second, shy, until Anna gently pushed her forward. She stepped onto the stage. The hush fell over the crowd. William kneeled beside her. And because of her, he said, we learned something far more valuable than profit. He looked out at the sea of faces. She reminded us what humanity looks like. The crowd erupted in applause. Tears fell. Hands covered mouths and hearts. Some people held their children closer. Emma stared out at them all, overwhelmed, then lifted her hand and gave the tiniest shy wave. Cheers exploded once more. Laughter, whistles, joyous shouts filling the sky. Fireworks burst in the late afternoon light. Not for a company's success, but for a child's truth. That night, as the sun set behind golden buildings and Emma sat on the grass beside her mother, she looked up at William. "Mr. Richardson?" she asked softly. "Yes, little star? Do you think the world heard me?" William looked at the thousands of happy faces around them, the families, the music, the lives rewritten, and he smiled. "Oh, Emma," he whispered, "the world didn't just hear you." He looked up at the sky, at the first star beginning to shine. It followed you. And somewhere in the darkness of the world, thousands of people felt a sudden urgito, tell the truth, to be kinder, to see those who were usually unseen. Because one invisible child had finally taught the world how to see again. That day, history didn't change because of power or money or influence. That IT changed because a little girl told the truth. Emma proved something the world often forgets. You don't have to be big to make a big difference. You just have to be brave enough to speak. And somewhere inside a once-lost billionaire, a child's whisper turned into a lifetime of seeing people again. Never underestimate the smallest voice in the room. That IT, it might be the one that saves everything.